life.
Is it on Sorry. Just one second.
Yeah, sure.
Panel, this technology allows manipulation of basic defining factors of living organisms. The environment and genetics are two of the most delicate framework that we have. A slight manipulation and small massive rippling effects all over the entire environment. We will prove why these manipulation will happen negatively and cause insurmountable damage. So our policy inside OG is just to ban, shut down existing research. That's held by countries from European Union as well as countries like Australia. We have three standards in order to win this debate. Firstly, we'll tell you how this causes massive environmental damage when it comes to things like the ecosystem, habitat, and things like that. Secondly, we'll tell you how this technology will endanger ethical treatments of animals. Thirdly, we'll tell you how this will cause moral hazard and harmful effects on human beings. We think on side opposition, they need to tell us why their benefits will massively outweigh the irreversible harm that we will later provide that ripples throughout society and our entire environment, and that their benefits wouldn't be subject to manipulation as well as would be equally accessible to people. So firstly, let's talk about massive environmental damage. We think that it's impossible for us to fully understand the impacts and the animal impacts on the environment. Why? We think under status quo, we don't understand fully the entire interaction of the infinite number of organisms, that the way they interact, the way their reproduction, ecosystem, and things like that. We don't think science are able to definitively account for every single interaction under the ecosystem. Why is this important to note the limits of science? Because it's important to note that an engineering of genetics that alter the way in which some parts of the ecosystem works will massively affect the interaction of the rest of the ecosystem, which cause massive harms later on or cause massive harm immediately as well. Things that science and statistics cannot accurately determine at the moment, right? Secondly, we think that this already happens under status quo as well. How? We told you that genetic manipulation, for example, in 2016, when they released a bunch of mosquitoes that were supposed to curb dengue, actually created many times over more dengue cases than it originally had. When Australia was trying to create crops that were better, actually created a gene that wiped out an entire species of crops. We think a lot of these things shows that despite our ability to manipulate genes, most of these things are limited. But why is this also really important? Because corporate incentive determines that despite the limitations of science and the lack of data that we inevitably have to deal with, corporate incentive always substeps most of these problems, right? For example, corporate incentive will also mean things like they have the ability to manipulate through lobbying power, to manipulate regulations as well as rules and things like that, right? This is massively dangerous because it will also cause things like negligence in favor of things like larger profit, and they're able to sell immediate impacts. So we think that the harms of creating more disease than were originally there, or the harms of wiping out an entire species of crops are very, very real problem given the fact that we have intense corporate incentive and the limitation of science.
So are you against all procedures that are unnatural, for example, gender reassignment surgery or genetic modification?
We're not against gender reassignment surgery, but we are against any form of manipulation of genetics.
Yes.
For example, we're also against GMOs, right? Secondly, let's talk about the way in which this ethically affects animals, right? We tell you that the way in which this will affect animals is that if you're able to genetically alter animals as well, we create a lot of different types of subsets of animals that will be harmed. Firstly, we will be able to create a larger industry of luxury pets. For example, toy poodles or bulldogs who can't walk because they have really, really tiny legs. They are apparently really adorable. Most of these animals, despite how adorable they are born with heart conditions because of those genetic manipulation. We also think that their ability to walk or their ability to survive are also massively harmed by the fact that they are altered to be more desirable to people, right? These are also created because of the massive industry and the amount of people who can pay for all of these luxury pets. We think genetic manipulation will make this a lot worse a lot worse, right? Secondly, we also say that livestock will be massively affected as well. A lot of livestock will be created, for example, livestock that are unable to walk, ducks and chicken, they are unable to walk but have a lot more fat in their body, for example, a lot more meat in their body, but results in things like heart failure, right? We think these are not ethical treatments of the way of animals. We think that this will be massively harmful towards them. We also think that this is also made worse because of the capitalist and corporate demand and consumer lifestyle that I had earlier explained. All this thing will cause all these things to be a lot worse. So thirdly, no, thank you. Let's talk about the moral hazard in the way in which it affects human beings. So in a way in which, in a world where genetic manipulation can easily create things like inherent intelligence, general attractiveness, or athletic abilities, we think all of these will create some minor benefits to some individuals, but will create a wide and insurmountable gap between people who can access that technology and people who can't. Side opposition can't come out and say, let's provide them to all people who need them, and we have a magic metric to decide who needs them and who doesn't. That world doesn't exist. The world that exists is the world that we have today. And we understand and recognize that there are many things that lead towards a difference in the rich and the poor, but this creates a definitive difference that creates an impenetrable difference between the rich and the poor and the privileged and the underprivileged. What does this mean? We tell you that, for example, if you have people who are white, rich, and able to create general intelligence for themselves, this further stigmatizes the poorer racial minorities because they are poorer, and then right now they are unable to access this technology to give them either general intelligence or general attractiveness, which further locks them out of a lot of things in society. It means it locks their ability for them to fight for political rights, for them to get a lot more influence and do a lot of things given the inherent genetic difference between the white and African Americans. We think these things are things that they cannot fix and cannot mitigate under their side as well. At the end of my speech, I've told you a couple of things that are really important this week, right? I told you how this creates massive environmental damage that science has limitations to be able to accurately determine, and corporate incentive dictates that we will sidestep all of this environmental damage concerns as well. Corporate incentive also suggests that they care very little about environmental damage, and all this lobbying means that we also will side in favor of corporate incentive. Secondly, I told you how this will definitely affect the way in which we treat animals and make animal treatments and animal rights a lot worse under their side. I also told you how this harmfully affects human beings and create a wide difference between people of different races, people of different privilege, and people of different ranks in society. We're extremely proud to oppose.
We thank the Prime Minister. Now we invite the Leader of Opposition to begin the case for opposition.
Panel, I would argue that opening government's case suffers from a lack of imagination. And the lack of imagination is one in which they are not able to see the long-term benefit that genetic research can do when it comes to freeing us for the first time in our lives from the biological determinism that's plagued humanity since the dawn of time. Before we move into that, let's first talk about our policy. We think we will continue into these kinds of research, and in fact, we will channel funds and heavily subsidize any kind of research that this happens under. We also think that we are happy to put in regulations to ensure that testing is something that is done to ensure that the kind of genetic research or like the kind of science that's out there in the world is safe, and we can do this, and this is a rebuttal to their argument about capitalist incentives by just saying this. The fact that these specific kinds of research can be seen to be dangerous, and there's been enough political capital to muster to say that these forms of research is banned, we think that the calculus of the way that people make decisions or politicians make decisions has always been, on one hand, the idea that they have to balance this corporate lobbying with the kind of with the investment and the amount of investment that the public in general has in that specific issue. When you're talking about an issue like genetic research, like they say, that is so viscerally available to these individuals, where there's already paranoia and phobia with regards to this particular issue, we think politicians are more likely to err on the side, no thank you, of creating regulations to ensure that the kind of fallout that comes out from failed genetic advances doesn't happen. So we think on our side, we're happy to defend regulations that ensures that the kind of research and the kind of technology that comes about it is safe. Thirdly, and most importantly, we think that we want to democratize this particular kind of technology. We will make it a point at which we recognize that there is something that is good and something that is safe. We want to ensure that as many people get access to this technology as possible. We'll heavily subsidize it, we'll distribute it for free at the point at which you so wish to engage in this kind of technology. We don't think that we support the idea of increasing differences among individuals. Okay, let's do some rebuttal first before I move on to constructive. First thing it told us was environmental damage. Guys, it's really bad. We don't understand the vectors in which like the nature works, and so we can't do anything to change the environment. Like, let's look at the way that we've treated our environment for the last century or so, right? We've already made many changes to our environment that cannot be reversed. The ozone layer had a huge hole in it. Already we have released we have already increased the temperature of the world, no thank you, by a couple of degrees, and we can't go back to that, no thank you. Why is this an important thing? That means that we have to create an environment in which we're able to adapt to the kind of artificial and unnatural changes that already existed in the world today, to the extent to which the kind of changes that exist in the environment right now cannot be repaired by Mother Earth itself because it was created by artificial means. We need to use artificial means and technology in order to solve the same problem. Their argument that says they're against GMO is one, no thank you, they ignores the kind of effect in alleviating the suffering and starvation of millions of individuals around the world, at a point in which GMO was able to literally feed mouths in a world in which famine would otherwise have struck them because these people were not, or these kind of crops were not resistant to things like certain pests or certain kinds of drought. To that end, we would argue that the risk that we have to take in order to ensure that even if there are some sort of long-term implications, is of the urgency that is necessary in order to ensure that these millions of individuals are able to survive in the now. So don't listen to them when they talk to you about things like environmental damage. We don't really understand what the environment is like, but we're always trying to change it anyway. Second thing they told us is that this endangers animals. Okay, now I'm going to move on to my constructive, because then I'll do a comparative between this and the idea of animals and show why this is much more important. The first thing that we want to talk about is how gene drives are uniquely capable in terms of freeing us from biological determinism. For the entirety of human existence, we have always tried to create ways in which we are better able to adapt to our environment, and we're better able to free ourselves from the tyranny of our own biology. We do it by creating things like clothes, like creating technology that allows us to fend off things in the environment. We have life-sustaining treatments, we have vitamins, we create minerals to ensure that we're able to better perform and live a better life, live a longer life and a healthier life, so that we're able to pursue more things that can maximize our happiness and our utility. But what we have always been stopped by is the fact that for a longest time, one, we are not able to change the fundamental genome of our structure, which means that we are always limited by what biology dictates that we are able to do. But secondly, we have always been unable to ensure that individuals who lose out in the birth lottery, who are born with genetic diseases, are individuals who are not left out in the race of pursuit of happiness. We're not just talking about things like ALS and cystic fibrosis, although they have to defend why at a point at which research is able to move to the point where we can literally cut out these kinds of diseases from our genetic genome for the rest of humanity, and ensure that people never have to suffer through these kind of resistance against why they're okay with that. But it's also about small problems or problems that plague individuals for the rest of their life. There are things that we can settle through genetic technology. So for instance, if we look at female reproduction, no thank you, and the way that the pill has been seen to give women depression, at a point at which you can create a gene that literally says that you can now choose or have a child that doesn't have the reproductive capacity, we think that's immensely helpful for some people. But also things like depression and bipolar and schizophrenia, mental illnesses that plague individuals in the daily existence, that have been proven to be linked to things like genetics, are things that we can now write out by existence to allow individuals to be able to pursue in a more meaningful sense the kind of life that they've always wanted to have. They told us it's about moral hazard, that now individuals are able to access this technology and the poor will not. Well, firstly, we would argue that to the large extent, these kinds of inequalities already exist. The rich already have certain advantages that the poor will never be able to access when it comes to things like better education, better food, better housing, the better environment which they grew up in. But what we want to point out to you, panel, is the idea that this is a much more democratized way of ensuring that these differences are alleviated. Why? Because when you have this technology, you literally actually enable at least the possibility or the alternative of a shortcut that these individuals are able to use to short-circuit the process of inequality. But the second thing, which is the important thing, is that we often, or what we propose to you, is that technology tends to proliferate downwards, which means technology tends to democratize over time. So it's only the rich will have the ability to access. But oftentimes, if you look in the way that the poorest, the poor, the most oppressed have riled up against the system to fight for equality and equal rights. The difference is now their ability to access this specific technology literally removes the need for them to campaign for most of the other rights that exist out there. Because you can no longer argue that a person who is born black doesn't have the same kind of general intelligence as a white individual, at the point where they can choose and genetically engineer a child that is as clever as a white person. Science can prove that to be true. So this is, Ms. Speaker, we think it's much more important than like saving pets. We are proud of those.
We thank the leader of opposition. May we invite the Deputy Prime Minister. Here.
Here. The fundamental flaw of the opposition bench in this debate is that while in the effort of having imagination, they forgot that debating is about analysis as well. So while telling us that apparently you potentially could have gotten the benefits of health, potentially having a magical wand to wave off all the human woes that currently plague human society today, ladies and gentlemen, they need to operate within the reality of which incentive structures as well as corporate structures affect those particular outcomes as well. So firstly, they can tell us whether those outcomes were likely, secondly, whether those outcomes were absolutely accurate, and thirdly, whether or not they could determine whether those outcomes would be the things that people at the top desire to begin with or not, ladies and gentlemen. All analysis that Jasmine provided, that Shermaine just flippantly flipped off as we want to save pets, apparently, ladies and gentlemen. That's why we thought it was absolutely unforgivable for the leader of opposition to apparently think that was sufficient in this particular debate. The first thing I want to do is really make them pay in regards to whether or not they responded to our argument in regards to ethics, in regards to how we treat animals or not. Ladies and gentlemen, industrial farming is a thing in society today. Whether or not you create cows that actually create heart palpitations, cancerous cells, ladies and gentlemen, and have livestock that literally suffer through their life in the effort of having more meat, ladies and gentlemen, is a reality that exists on that side of the house when you actually have control over animals like that. When it comes to people, for example, luxury pets, we have an entire industry where millions of animals, ladies and gentlemen, are literally cultivated to have miserable lives in having aesthetic value for human beings on that side. Otherwise, you literally can't tell me that you don't care about environmental damage, but also inherently feel pain as well as feeding into corporate as well as consumerist culture, ladies and gentlemen, and actually have to suffer through more because the ability for human beings to control now also how they actually are formulated under that side of us. So under status quo, they can breed them, but fundamentally are not able to breed them into literal suffering and literal subsistence living on that side of the house. Ladies and gentlemen, they need to respond to why they create objectively millions more, ladies and gentlemen, suffering on that side of the house. But secondly, the reason why we think that it was extremely important for them to respond to the characterization of whether or not we, number one, can fully understand the environmental impacts in regards to our scientific manipulation, but secondly, our understanding of genetics and whether or not we can understand, ladies and gentlemen, even though we understand the gene code and we've mapped out the gene code, ladies and gentlemen, what we fundamentally have been unable to understand is the fact that the genes aren't just like taking pharmaceutical products or, ladies and gentlemen, taking on vitamins. The fact that you change one single unit and one single aspect of your genes create a completely different structure or species or even genetic structure for that individual. Ladies and gentlemen, we have figured out those particular things. Those two characterizations are exceptionally important because they fundamentally underlies all the benefits that the opening opposition wanted to claim. Whether or not you are able to accurately determine whether or not you can remove things, whether or not you can save the environment, whether or not you can ensure that you can survive the damages that come from human activity right now, all are determined whether or not you can actually tackle those issues or not under that setup. And it's a shame that Shermaine just didn't want to respond to that. But secondly, ladies and gentlemen, we also think that there's a fundamental misunderstanding understanding on the opening opposition in regards to how much you can mitigate corporate incentives and corporate structures on that side of us. Sure, you are able to subsidize things and are able to, ladies and gentlemen, be able to pay for things, ladies and gentlemen. But ladies and gentlemen, let's look at status quo right now. Government sponsor and subsidize things like HIV medication and pharmaceutical products, billions and billions of dollars in the pharmaceutical industry, but fundamentally less valuable products, things like stymieing environmental protection and things like environmentally friendly technology are oftentimes being shut down because corporate interests are able to lobby governments in order to make sure that environmental standards are kept low. The reason for that, ladies and gentlemen, is because the fundamental premise of the opening opposition case is based on whether or not people are able to lobby active political challenge and be aware or not about these things. But three fundamental limitations to that. First, that's dependent upon people being aware about the environmental damage that's being inflicted upon them on that side house. The fact that the scientific community is unable to understand the far-reaching consequences about your environmental damage, what more the layman on the street that's supposed to be protesting these pharmaceutical industries and the environmental damage that they are causing on that side house. But secondly, you're also assuming that people in the public care about the far-reaching consequences of species upon species being obliterated in the environment for the simple exchange of immediate goods and services that they get from these particular circumstances, ladies and gentlemen. They don't get that benefit there. But thirdly, you're also depending upon those corporate structures not manipulating voters like how they do right now in the status quo, ladies and gentlemen. Whether it be information withholding, things like red tape, ladies and gentlemen, lobbying to make sure that people don't get access to information, making sure that you put out political ads and campaign contributions to make sure you manipulate public opinion. In all those circumstances, oftentimes the media is tied in with these corporate incentives as well, and there's a revolving door between politics, media, and the corporate industry. How do you surmount all those challenges in making sure that you hold them accountable and actually make sure that you have the proper regulatory standards? Because make it clear, ladies and gentlemen, that the case of opening